welcome back to Yerushalmi Pesachim. The Shir is the Nishmat of Yitzchok ben Rabbi Yaakov Natan el Cohen. He was my grandfather, who's the also is today. We are Perich Mishi Alach base. We are Lamed Zayin, Lamed Vav on the base. Now, come Pesach. Now remember, you remember your Kodshim days, where you have to do things right. Lishma, you have to bring korbanos for the right purposes. You mustn't have the wrong thoughts. Remember, there are 4 avodas with a korban. You slaughter the animal, then you receive the blood, you walk and take the blood, and then you sprinkle the blood. Remember the idea of pigul. If you have the intention that the Mizbeach will have the animal food in the wrong time, or that the person will eat it in the wrong time. And that's the case of kores, right? And then there's obviously problems of psul. It's going to be eaten in the wrong place. There are all those problems. So let's see now. So those are some of the ideas that we're going to come across. Right, let's say you slaughtered a Korban Pesach, but not for a Pesach. Now, you slaughtered it for a Shlamim, right? Now, you slaughtered it for a Shlamim, or Kibel, you receive the blood, which again we said is one of the 4 avodas of the Korban. V'hinech, you walk with it. V'zorak, you sprinkled it. So these are the 4 avodas, and all of it shalai lishmai. You received the blood, took it to the mizbeach, sprinkled it with the intention for the wrong animal. Or maybe you first thought lishmai, but then afterwards you changed it to shalai lishmai. Afterwards you changed it, you're thinking you're doing it for another korban. Right? You start slaughtering thinking this is a Pesach, and you finish the shchita, we're still talking about the same avodah, you finish the shchita with the intention, this is not a Pesach. Or shalai lishmai, you start doing a job with the intention, this is not a Pesach, and then you change your mind, with lishmai. In the middle of the shchita, you suddenly think, wait a minute, this is a Korban Pesach. Then the din is pasul, the animal is pasul. Right? You cannot carry on with the avodah, you can't receive the blood, do not pass go, do not offer up the murim. Alright? And even if you've done all these things, the thing is pasul. You can't eat from the meat. Okay? Kesar lishmai v'shalai lishmai. What's an example of where you have the right intention and the wrong one? For example, l'shem Pesach, l'shem Shlamim. You think, right, this is a Pesach, and then middle of Shchita, this is a Shlamim. And what is Shalai Lishmai V'Lishmai, or the other way around? The Shem Shlamim or the Shem Pesach. So it's the other way around. You're first thinking this is a Shlamim, then you think it's a Pesach. Okay. Now what is the source in the Torah that you have to do the Avodah of the Pesach for the sake of the Korban Pesach? Just by the way, the Mishnah in Zvachim, it says that all animals that are slaughtered Shalai Lishma, usually they are kosher. But you don't fulfill your duty as an obligation, except for Pesach and Chatas. Those ones you get the intention of the wrong korban, it's possible. Right? Everything else, you do a shlamim thinking it's a taida or something, it's kosher. You don't fulfill your duty, but it's a valid korban. But Pesach and Chatas, no. So, okay, let's see the Gemara here. How do you know that you have to get it right, and if not, it's possible? You will say this is the Korban Pesach. Loma to tell you Shimshachta l'shem Pesach. If you slaughter it for Pesach, hurry a Pesach, then it's a Pesach. And if not, ain't a Pesach, then I'm afraid it's no good. Now, what about other avodas? That's talking about slaughtering, but what about the other jobs that are being done? Shakal Masaf, receiving the blood, walking with it, sprinkling it, minayin. How do you know they have to be lishmai? It says V'asisa Pesach. So tell me, Shukal Masaf l'shem Pesach. All the avodas of the korban need to be done for the sake of the Korban Pesach. Me'ata. If you're going to learn from V'asisa Pesach that everything needs to be done for Pesach, maybe. Now, remember, there's 4 jobs I spoke about. I spoke about slaughtering, receiving the blood, walking with the blood, and sprinkling the blood. Now, what about putting the fats on the Mizbeach? Now, that's not one of the 4 jobs. So there, it's not so crucial if you have the wrong thoughts. So Me'ata, if you're going to say V'asisa Pesach, like all things to do with the Korban Pesach, let's go further. Afilu Hekte Murin. Let's say putting the meat on the Mizbeach has to be for the sake of Pesach. And yet the Mishnah only mentions those 4. Tabaloma, why it says Zebach. Right? To tell you, Mazvicha Miyochedes Shchita is unique. Shima Keves is a kapara that is essential for the forgiveness. And it passes a korban if it was done wrongly. So the avodah that are essential for the kapara would pass if they were done wrong. As opposed to putting the meat on the Mizbeach, Yatsu Hekte Murin She'edan Magbin Zakabara. They're not essential for the forgiveness. Even if, although there's no real forgiveness for the Korban Pesach, it's a borrowed term, yeah? So even though if you don't put the meat on the Mizbeach or the Coven, it's still kosher. right? If you did the Haktorah, therefore with the wrong intention, the korban is still kosher. Now, in the beginning of Zvachim, we've learnt, as I quoted to you before, that korban Pesach and Chatos that are slaughtered with the wrong intentions, they are apostle. So we've spoken about Pesach, so now what about the source for Chatos, that if you get it wrong, it's apostle? Chatos minai. Where do I learn that if you slaughtered a Chatos for the wrong intentions, it's apostle? It says, V'shachat oiseh lechatos. The shechita needs to be for the sake of the Chatos. It can be only for the sake of the Chatos. Right? Now we bring a source here that shechita shelo lishma is possible. The Bavli brings a source for the din that shechita needs to be lishma, and also a source that b'diavad is possible as well. Okay. What about all the other things you do with the chatas? The other avodas, minayin. How do I know they have to be lishma? It says va'asa you shall do is ha'achal chatas. So we're comparing them. We're saying all the actions you do have to be lishma. Me'ata. Well, if you're going to learn from that pasuk, that all actions have to be for chatas, I feel a hektei murin. Again, maybe the burning of the fats on the mizbeach has to be the same lishma. Tamalo, it says no, v'shachat. You're slaughtering it. Mashchita miyuchedes, shchita is unique. She ma'akeres the kapara is essential for the behemoth. So also any avodah which is essential for the kapara apostles if it's done wrongly, as opposed to yatsu hektei murin she'edan ma'akeres as a kapara. They are not essential for the kapara. If you ended up putting the meat on the mizbeach thinking it was not a chatas, it would not matter. Now, apart from the obligation to bring a korban lishma for the sake of that korban, you have to also bring it for the right owner. Okay? And Pesach and chatas, the din is, if you bring it for the wrong owners, it's puzzle. Now, what is the source that you should bring these korbanos for their owners? So we start with chatas this time. Chatas Hashem ba'alaminai. How do you know chatas to bring for the owner? Yeah? Well, asa kailas chatas. He shall do the chatas v'chiper ala mitahem v'tzavasai. That he provides a kapara, right? That all the actions of the chatas have to be for the sake of, no, talking about Matzorah there. But it's got to be for the sake of the person who is purifying himself. It's got to be for him and not for anyone else. I see. But he said, Me'ata. Well, if you're telling me all it has to be for the sake of the owner, and if not, it's possible, I feel a hektei murin. Well, even the fats on his mizbeach maybe is included. No. Talmud Levit says, V'chiper. It's a kapara with sprinkling of blood. Mazrikim yochedes, sprinkling is unique. Shimakeres kapara, it puzzles, it's unique, it's essential. If it's done wrong, it's no good. So any avodah which is essential to the forgiveness would puzzle if it's done wrong. As opposed to yatsu hektei murin, as opposed to burning the fats of the mizbeach, she'ena ma'akeres kapara, right? They are not essential to the forgiveness. So then you told me now what's the source that changing the owner would puzzle a korban. What about a source for korban Pesach? You've got to get the right person. Pesach l'shem ba'alim minai. How do I know if you bring it for the sake of someone else is no good? But dinu, we can learn it with the Kavachim. Because ma'im chatas. Now chatas, she'en machshavas areilim utzmeim poslimba. You have the wrong intention, or it's done for an orel, someone does not have bris milah, someone is tameh. If let's say you slaughter a chatas for someone, for the owner who's tameh, that doesn't puzzle the korban. Right? Tameh, now he can't eat a korbanos, but he can send his korbanos to be offered on his behalf. Right? The eating of the owner is not essential for the kapara to be a kapara, right? So even though he's tameh, he can still bring a korban chatas, right? So it makes no difference, so it doesn't matter. So if chatas we say, you've got to get the right person, even though if he's tameh, it doesn't matter. But tzricha shetei l'shem ba'alim, he said it has to be for the right person. Pesach has got a severity. As we'll see soon. If you bring korban Pesach to someone who's tameh, it's a problem. So how much more so you should need to do it for the owner? But the Gemara says no, look, because in a matter of a chatas, look, a chatas you've got to get the owner right. Shehi kachim is more severe. As opposed to Pesach, Taima, are you going to say that Pesach shukachim kalim is less severe korban? Maybe it doesn't matter. Now, why do we still want to say that machshava of the wrong owner pasul Pesach kavachayba b'chatas? I'm revealing that. Lo machshava lamanta. Now, surely the psul machshava, the problem with thought, you want to learn Pesach from chatas, and it really is not a problem because Torah ribas machshava b'Pesach yes min chatas. The Torah talks about many problems of thought with Pesach more than chatas does. So, as far as psul machshava, Pesach is more severe. So we should learn that kavachayba. If the change of ownership, the wrong machshava, the wrong owner passes chatas, how much more so it should pass over Pesach? We don't really have a problem. Oh, it's country kolim. This is country chomer. That's not really a problem here. The fact is, the Torah brings many various psulim with common Pesach. Now, what about the source that the change of owner passes with a chatas? And we spoke about it, and we said it was with the pasha of a Matzayra. That's where we learned it from. So, you want to learn all the dinim. That every chatas, you got to get the owner, the right machshav of the right owner. You want to learn from Matzayra. Matzayra was singled out. Well, how was it singled out? It needs various wine libations. Could be there's a din you have to bring in the Shem Balim for the owner. Dava. Now something Dava Shiansa Lechidushai. If it's singled out for a reason, you can't apply that to everywhere else. Eilim Eidim, and you can't use to apply that to elsewhere. How can you learn the psul of change your owner with all chatais from a pasuk Matzayra which got a special din? Amalek. So Ramana answer back. Now, you want to tell me, a chatas of Matzayra, where have we learned that if you slaughter it for someone else, it's pasul? Where did he get it from? Surely from this pasuk of Siv, with a normal chatas it says, you have to slaughter it for a chatas. The shchita not for a chatas is pasul. So that's where the normal chatas is, says that. Uksiv, and it says Zayis Torah Sachatas. We learn that the Torah puts all chatas together. Torah achas achar chatas. Ela, therefore you have to say, Mimakam shehi lemeida misham hi melamedes. So it means that a hekesh that you want to learn on a chatas mitzvah that it's possible by changing it. It also tells me for other chatas that also possible if you change the owner. Yeah, just like a chatas, the hekesh about a chatas is possible, like if you change it around. So that also tells me other chatas that are possible if you change the owners. So we can apply and learn everything. Okay. Now about machlokes, about having the wrong thoughts, right? Shachtei lishmai. So you slaughter it thinking, right, it's a Pesach. And while you're slaughtering it, you're thinking, Lizra Gadama Shalai Lishmai. Well, I'm also going to sprinkle the blood for another purpose. Yeah? So while you're slaughtering it, you're thinking, and I'm going to sprinkle the blood for something else. Yes, Shalai Lishmai, Ma'avoda Lavoda. Yes, a thought of the wrong thought, which you're doing at another job. So you're doing shchita now. You're thinking now on sprinkling, which is later on, that is effective, and hupaisel. It would passel the carbon. So while you're doing shchita, you think, I'm going to sprinkle it wrong, the wrong purpose, that would passel the carbon. That is Rav Yechon's view. Rish Lakish on basis ain shalai lishmai ma'avoda lavoda. No, the machshava of the wrong idea can't be during one avoda for another avoda. It doesn't help. But yehei kosher, and therefore the animal's kosher. Oh, Ravila. The machshava speaks. So where did Rav Yechon say? So Rav Yechon said what? Yes, while you're doing shchita, you can passel a later job by thinking you're going to do it wrong. And Rish Lakish said you can't. So where did they get it from? Oh, Ravila. Machshava's pigol limud Rav Yechon. Rav Yechon learned his din. The machshava shloi lishma from avoda helps from Saul. He learnt it from pigol. Now with the idea of pigol, remember pigol is I'm slaughtering an animal thinking it's going to be eaten at the wrong time, or the mizbeach will get the food at the wrong time. Ilu. Now let's follow this girsa. Ilu shachat. If you slaughter an animal, I'm going to ask lizrok dama lemacha. Right? The intention, the blood's going to be sprinkled on the mizbeach tomorrow. That's the wrong time. That's proper pigol. Shema ain't a pigol. Do you think it's not pigol? So you're doing it while you're slaughtering. You are thinking of another job. I'm going to sprinkle the blood late. The mizbeach, we said, wherever the mizbeach gets needs to be on time. If it's late, it's pigol. So here, Shahan Amnas Nizrak Dama Lavacha Shema ain't a pigol. Of course it's pigol. That is the whole thing of Mashava's pigol. So the same thing. Mashava, the wrong purpose. Shachta Lishmai. If you slaughter for the right purpose and you're thinking, Lizrak Dama Shalai Lishmai, well, I'm going to do the sprinkling for the wrong purpose, it is possible. And that is approved too. That's where Rav Yechon got his din. Now there's two problems on Ravila, that the source of Rav Yechon is from pigol. So right, remember, what was Rav Yechon's din? While you're doing one job, you can think about doing another job wrong. For two reasons you cannot compare Mashava's pigol So machshavas psul. Now, shaloi lishma is psul. Pigul is to eat in the wrong time. But they're not the same types of problems. Because with pigul, if you slaughter it lishma, that means machshava which is roi, and you think you're doing it right, and you think, I'm going to receive the blood wrongly. Tomorrow I'm going to receive the blood. Shema ena kosher. Do you honestly think it's not kosher? So you're slaughtering it right, and you're thinking, I'm going to receive the blood. Now, receiving the blood is not a pigul problem, is it? Pigul problems is going on the mizbeach late or eating it late. Receiving the blood late is not a pigul problem. So, if you had the right intentions for shchita, but you're going to receive the blood wrong, I'll receive the blood tomorrow. Is there a problem with that? Shema ena kosher. Do you think that's a problem? Of course it's kosher. Because your intention of receiving the blood does not create a pigul, which is a problem. Whereas, a machshava shaloi lishma, Rav Yochanan holds, shachta lishma. Alright, I slaughter it thinking it's a Pesach. And then I'm thinking, lekabel damo shaloi lishma. I'm going to receive the blood, not tomorrow, but for a different, I'm going to treat it as a different problem when I receive the blood. Puzzle, you see, it's puzzle. So don't tell me we can learn things from pigul where Rav Yochanan got his din, that machshava shaloi lishma from one avodah to an actual puzzle. Because they're not the same. Pigul on a Kabbalah Saddam is nothing. Whereas Kabbalah Saddam thinking it's another korban is a problem. Now another difference between Pigul and Shaloi Lishma. With Pigul, Ilu Shachta Lishmai. If you slaughter it Lishmai, that means with a fit machshava, and you're thinking Lahakte Murav, to put the fats on the Mizbeach Shaloi Lishmai for tomorrow. Shema Eina Pigul. You think that's not Pigul. Now remember, whatever the Mizbeach has to get on time, if you're thinking the Mizbeach will get it late, that's Pigul. So, if you slaughter it for the right purpose, but you're thinking, I'm going to put the fats tomorrow. Shema ena pigul, you think it's not pigul? Of course it is. Whereas machshava shaloi lishma, even because of Yochanan, shachta lishma, if you slaughter it lishma and you're going to offer the imurim, the fats, shaloi lishma, right, shaloi lishma, with the wrong intention, it is kosher. So based on these differences between pigul and shaloi lishma, you see, you can't learn, Rav Yochanan couldn't have learned his din from pigul. His din, the machashra avodah. He couldn't have learned from there. Now Rabbi Yossi brings another explanation. What was the aside? Where did Rav Yochanan get his din? That a thought of shaloi lishma from one avodah to another avodah would pass the carbon. Rabbi Yossi, Anachas Rav Yirmiyah, as Rav Yirmiyah, Tavis Rabbi Bar, Amalei, as Rav Yirmiyah caught Rabbi Bar, and he said to him, Emali Tabar Rav Yochanan. Where did Rav Yochanan get his din from? Lama, why does he hold Shachta Lishmai? Look, I slaughter it with the right intention. And then I think, I'm going to sprinkle the blood with the wrong one. Why does he hold his puzzle? And Rebbe answered him, you know the reason of Yochanan, when you slaughter the Shmai to sprinkle the blood of Shmai, it's as if, from the very beginning, you were slaughtering it with two intentions. You hear that? What are you doing? You slaughter it for the right. You think I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the wrong. He says it's as if when you were slaughtering it, you had two intentions. And that's why it's possible. You hear that? As if when I slaughtered it, I'm slaughtering it for Pesach and something else. That's why it's possible. However, so Rav Yirmiyah said, well, if that's the case, that the reason of Yochanan is because you're thinking in Shechita on the sprinkling, and it's as if you're actually in the Shechita itself, then I feel a Shachtay la'oichlav. Even if you slaughter it on Pesach, for those who can eat kazais, and you're intending lizrak is damai, but the intention is I'm going to sprinkle the blood shalai for those who can't eat it, it should still be kosher, because based on what you're saying, whatever you think later on, we drag it back as if you had the intention at the beginning. So v'yasem b'shavashayna is if from the very beginning, kiddush shachta is if you slaughtered it for everyone, la'ichlav, for those who are going to eat it, but shalai la'ichlav, the ones who are not going to eat it, and therefore yehei kosher. It should be kosher. You hear what he's saying? He said, look, you sprinkle it with the right intention, you slaughter it for the right intention. And in the middle of slaughtering, you start thinking, I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the wrong one. So we say, well, we should imagine that's brought back as if everything's happening in the Shechita, and therefore it's as if you're having in mind for the right people and the wrong people. And it should be okay. Now, if you're going to tell me, according to Yochanan, when you slaughter Pesach for people, in order to sprinkle the blood not for those who are going to eat it, and you're going to tell me it's kosher. Unless yachil, you can't say that. The honor of Yerushalmi, he said, Shachtoi la'echlav, if you slaughter the Pesach to those who are going to eat it, in order lizrek damash la'echlav, but you're going to sprinkle the blood for those who are not going to eat it, it is possible. So what do you see from here? According to Yochanan, a thought about sprinkling at the time of slaughtering is not considered a mix of machshavos in the shechita itself, and not like Rabbi Bar wanted to say, this is where Yochanan got it from. No, he wouldn't have got it from here. But then the Gemara says, actually, we're going to push away Rabbi Yirmiyah, and we ask the question on Rabbi Bar. Ask Rabbi Yaakov bar Rachav Rabbi Yochanan. He said, Shachtoi la'oichlav. So you slaughter Kom Pesach for those to eat it, and your intention is Lizrek Dama Shleila Eichlav. You know what? You suddenly think, right, I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the wrong people. It is kosher, and this is Rabbi Bar's Pshat and Rabbi Yochanan. The machshava on the sprinkling at the time of shechita is like various thoughts. We drag them back, as it were, into the shechita itself. Now the Gemara says Rabbi Yosef actually found a support to the explanation of Rabbi Bar in the view of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yosef Nasiv Chaim in Trei Tamad Rabbi Yochanan. He took support from the Hesba Rabbi Bar that there's like we bring the thoughts back into shechita from two different dinim of Rabbi Yochanan, which seem to contradict each other. On the one hand, Rabbi Yochanan said, if you slaughter it lishmai and you have intention to sprinkle the blood shloi lishmai, it's possible. You hear that? You slaughter it for the right purpose. Then you think I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the wrong purpose. On the one hand, it's possible. On the other hand, he says, if you slaughter it for those who eat, and then you think I'm going to sprinkle it for those who can't eat, it's kosher. What's the reason for the difference? But according to Rabbi, we understand. You hear the difference from both sides. You slaughter it thinking for Lishma, for Pesach. And in the middle of the slaughtering, you think, I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the wrong one. That's a problem. Whereas, if you slaughter it to think, I'm not saying whether around is it? You slaughter it lishmai, and I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the shlo lishmai, it's possible. But if you slaughter it for those who are going to eat it, and then you think I'm going to for those who can and those who can't, it's kosher. So what's the difference? So where are we? Shachta lishmai is with shlo lishmai possible. Nasim b'shav v'shayna, is that where we are? Because shachta lishmai v'shlo lishmai. It's different from the beginning. You slaughtered it for everyone, and therefore it's for both reasons, and therefore it's possible. But on the other hand, lama shachta la'echlav, you slaughter it for those who eat it, and you're thinking lizrek davai shalai la'echlav. Well, sprinkle the blood for those who can't eat it. Why is it kosher? Naasek v'shav v'shayna shachta, because from the very beginning it's as if v'shachta la'echlav v'shalai la'echlav. You slaughter it for those who can eat and those who didn't eat, and therefore it is kosher. So that's why he wants to say that. Now, the third explanation to the dinner of Yochanan, that when you slaughter lishmai, and I'm going to sprinkle the blood, shaloi lishmai, it is possible. The reason for Rav Yochanan, that if you shecht lishmai, but I'm going to sprinkle the blood shaloi lishmai, why is it possible? So he says like this. This is a new idea, which we've not seen before. He says like this. Now, any avodah where machshava would help to passel at the time of avodah, if you had the wrong intention while you're doing it, it would be a problem. Then you can have the thought at the time of doing another job and would also passel, as if you had that thought while you actually did the avodah. You hear what he says? Any avodah, which by having the wrong thought you can passel. So also if you're doing another job, but you think about this avodah, you can also passel it, even though you're doing something else. That's what his din is. That's what this third interpretation in Rav Yochanan. Since while you're doing it, you can passel it. If you're doing something else and you think about it, this, you can also passel it. Now we're going to question this. So Rav Yochanan explains, based on this cloud, that Rav Hanani explains, based on this chart, the view of Rav Yochanan, when you slaughter, in order to sprinkle the blood, shaloi lishmai, it's possible. Now, if you slaughter, sprinkle the blood with the wrong intention. Shema Eila Pasul, now it's definitely possible. Right? Sprinkling the blood for the wrong carbon. Therefore, Shachtai Lishmai, if you slaughtered it for the right purpose, but you're thinking, Lizrek Damage, I'm going to sprinkle the blood for the wrong purpose. Pasul is if you had that intention at the time of doing the sprinkling. So with this, you can understand the second din of Rav Yochanan, with the machshava for the wrong people. When you slaughter the Korban Pesach, your intention is to sprinkle the blood, not for those if it's not for those who are going to eat it, it's kosher. Because the din of shalai la'echlav doesn't passel if you had that intention at the time of sprinkling. It passels only if you had that intention during the shechita. So since if you would have had during the sprinkling, shalai la'echlav, if you thought about the wrong people, the korban's kosher. So the same thing, if you had that intention at the time of shechita to sprinkle the blood for the wrong people, it is going to be kosher. Okay. Now Rabbana comes along, and he asks two questions on the Pirush of the view of Rabbi Yochanan. He says, wait a minute. Now what about you had the right intentions when you slaughtered it? And you're thinking, you know what, I'll receive the blood tomorrow. Shema eno kosher. You honestly think the animal is not is a problem and it's pigul? The animal is kosher. The machshava shaloi v'zmanai on receiving the blood is not a pigul problem. Nevertheless, the shas kabbalah mechashivu. But a machshava at the time of receiving the blood to sprinkle the blood tomorrow would create a pigul situation. Harav, what do we see? Kol she'ilu yava la'isa avoda. Anything if you come to the avoda v'hu mechashiv la, like here, and you have that thought about it, like here. The machshava at the time of receiving the blood would puzzle. But nevertheless, you can't have that thought while doing something else for this. If you slaughter in order with the intention, when I receive the blood, I'll receive it tomorrow, that's still valid, that's still kosher. Now another question on the cloud, which Rabbi Hanani has said, to explain Rabbi Yochanan. He says, you slaughter the animal with the right thought. And your intention is, I'm going to burn the fats tomorrow. Shema eno pigul. You think that's not pigul? Of course it's pigul. And yet, v'shas haktara eno mechashev. And machshava shlo v'zmaneh, while you're putting the limbs on the mizbeach, that doesn't pass. So remember, putting the limbs on the mizbeach is not one of the four avodas, right? You got slaughtering, you got receiving the blood, you got walking, and sprinkling. You don't have putting the food on the mizbeach. So he said, v'shas haktara eno mechashev. Machshava shlo v'zmaneh, the time putting the emurim doesn't pass. Harav, therefore you see, kol she'ilu yava la'isa avoda. If you come to this job, like machshavas pigul, while you're bringing these fats and the mizbeach, doesn't puzzle. Nevertheless, machshav avoda acheres la. Machshava pigul, time of shechita on the emurim would puzzle. If you're doing shechita, and you're thinking, I'm going to put it on the mizbeach later, it would be a problem. And this goes against the klal of Hanania, because according to what he said, it should be, since machshava pigul, the time of actually putting it on the mizbeach wouldn't puzzle, so machshava at the time of shechita also wouldn't puzzle. He's saying, if it doesn't puzzle while you're doing it, it can't puzzle on the previous one. But Hanani answered back, again, you're comparing all problems here. Pigul, so don't start doing that. Don't equate them. The Rabbi said, for two reasons you cannot compare machshavas pigul with machshavas psul. The problem of pigul and psul, you can't compare them. Now we come back to the machlokes. Actually, he says here, what are the two reasons why we find a chiluk between shalai lishmai and pigul? Machshava on receiving the blood, machshava shalai lishmai passes. Pigul doesn't passel. And machshava on the emurim, shalai lishmai doesn't passel, but pigul passels. So they're not the same. The getter of pigul is not the same as shalai lishmai. So you cannot start asking from pigul on what he said. But now, back to the machlokes of Yochanan and Shlokish, even machshava from one work to another work. How, So he asks like this. What's the difference? Another difference there is, the machlokes is the machshava of the wrong thought, from one job to another, if that helps or not. Chilufin, they argue, where does it come about, the problem? The rest of the year. Pesach that slaughtered the rest of the year. So in this situation, Rav Yochanan allows a korban, the Shlokish passes it. Now a korban set aside for Pesach, and it's slaughtered at the wrong time, the din is like this. If it's slaughtered for Pesach, it's possible. If it's slaughtered for Shlamim, or even if it's slaughtered also for Pesach and for Shlamim, it's kosher. So if that's the case, Shachta Lishmai, if you slaughter it for Korban Pesach, and you have in mind, Lizvay Dama Shalai Lishmai, you're going to sprinkle the blood for, let's say, a Shlamim. And this, B'Shayu Moshe Shana, the rest of the year, So what is it? You slaughter Pesach for Pesach, and you think I'm going to sprinkle the blood for Shlomim, and it's talking about the rest of the year. Adate Rav Yochanan, according to Rav Yochanan, machshava from avoda to avoda. So you got mixed up in the shechita machshava for Pesach, machshava for Shlomim, and it's kasher. Whereas Adate Rish Lakish, who held that one machshava from one avoda to another doesn't help. The shechita was only for the sake of Pesach, and therefore the animal is possible. The animal is no good. Now we talk about, still with me, yeah? Now we talk about a Korban Pesach, which is slaughtered in the wrong time, which changes to be a Shlomim. On this matter, he asked me, my father, the Chachmei Bavel say, where do I see that if you do a Pesach the rest of the year, it becomes a Shlomim? So we learn like this. Anything from the sheep comes shlamim. So any korban that comes from the sheep is korban Pesach. What sort of animal comes from sheep? Sheep and goats is korban Pesach. And if you bring it at the wrong time, it should be brought shlamim. Hatzivu. So they ask the question. Arei Oila min atzai. Now Oila comes from sheep. And if you're saying me, oh min atzai kabonai means any korban from the sheep must be shlamim, then it should be like the leftovers of an Oila. You know, if you set aside money to buy an Oila, and you've got a bit of money left over, you can buy a Shlomim. The Mishnah in Shkalim, it says, leftovers of an Oila, you can bring it as an Oila. Well, we should say you should only bring it as a Shlomim. And one answers, when the Torah says Zerach Shlomim, Dava she'ena ba ela ben outside. We're saying you can only buy something bought from sheep, like Korban Pesach. As opposed to Oila, yes, Oila shiva afilim ben abaka. That can come from cattle as well, so we're definitely not including cattle. Hatibu, they ask. Hare Asham. Now, Korban Asham only comes from sheep. Right? And therefore, we should say any leftovers Asham, you can buy a Shlomim with it. In Shkalim, it says leftovers of an Asham, you bring Oila. Amar Rabuna bar Kahana, it says, Ve'im min hatzayin. Dava haba mikal hatzayin. You can bring something that comes in common from all sheep and goats, that's Korban Pesach. As opposed to, Yasa Asham, she'ena ba ela min hakvasim b'vad. That only comes from sheep. Therefore, you can't bring in Asham, you can only bring something which comes from all sheep, which is Korban Pesach. Now, this is learned from the word min. Usually you're telling me, min is lemait, it's to exclude. Here we're saying min is lerabba, it's to include. Rabban said, also in this passage, it says you bring your sheep from your sheep, your korban, it's coming min lemait, to reduce it. Because we're talking about Korban Pesach, Miyat, and why are we reducing it? It cannot be brought from sheep and shtei shanim in the second year. It's going to be within the first year. Or Miyat, another exclusion. It can't be female. It only come from the males. And that which Rabban bar Kahana said, we're talking about korban that comes from all types of sheep, is learned from the extra hay, the word hatzoi. Now, Abba bar Abba asked another third question on this drasha that the Chachmei Bava said. Hativon. They asked the question. But Al-Kasif says, if you're going to bring from the sheep, you can bring from the sheep or the goats. But let's say leftover Korban Pesach can be brought as an Oila offering. Just like you're dashing with Shlamim. If there's any sheep available for Shlamim, so Masechet Pesach, which is coming from the sheep who brought Shlamim, we should also dashen the pasuk similar with Oila. Masechet Pesach, with a single korban, which comes from the sheep or the goat, should be brought Oila. And why would I prefer the drasha with Shlamim from that which it says with Oila? Why presume that drasha is more correct? We're prepared to change something as a korban for eating. Korban Pesach is eaten by Yonas, but davar shehul achila. Again, it's what's over as a korban which is for eating, like Shlamim. We do not, however, change something which is for eating, like Korban Pesach, to an Oila which is not eaten. But you can change a korban to Kachim Kalim, like Korban Pesach l'shein, for the sake of another korban which is Kachim Kalim, like Shlamim. You cannot, however, change it to be a more severe Kachim like an Oila. We haven't said. On this din, which we quoted, Rav Chanina argued, the Inun Amrin, The Chachamim said, Ein Pesach Mishtana L'Shem Shlamim, and then Kein Shachta L'Shem Shlamim. The Achatzis for the sake of Shlamim stops being a Pesach, makes it Shlamim. But if you slaughter it for the sake of let's say another carbon, like Oila, whatever, it's possible. I say I feel the shame Oila. If you slaughter it as an Oila, it changes, for a Shlamim, and it is kosher. Rav said, Tamar Rabbi Yochanan, the reason for Rabbi Yochanan, it says ve'im min hatzayin karban zevach shlamim. The word zevach is extra. It tells me kosher zevach, anything for the sake of any carbon which is zevach, right? You slaughter an animal even shlamim zmano ba shlamim. That should end up being a shlamim. Okay, now the Gemara continues with Pesach now. Mishtana el machshavas psul. So this is Pesach. You slaughter it in the wrong time for another carbon. But the shechita was not. The shechita was done. So 1 second. Pesach shlev izmanai, right? So not the right time. You slaughtered it for another carbon, and the shechita was done with the wrong intentions. So mishtana lemachshavas psul. What's the dip? So Pesach shlev izmanai. You slaughter it for the sake of another carbon. Let's say an oila. But you had intention during the shechita a machshava which would pass on the carbon. So is it uprooted? Do we get rid of the Shem Pesach from it, and it becomes a shlamim? Or do we say, shechita machshavas psul can't remove the Pesach from the carbon? As if it's the Pesach which is shlev izmanai and would passel. Hey Dovid. So what did he do? What's the situation? Shachta l'shem oila, manas bezrek dam l'macha. You slaughter it for an oila, come Pesach, you slaughter it for an oila, with the intention to receive the blood tomorrow, which is machshava which make pigul the carbon. The question is, do we say that the Shem Pesach was moved away? And what says, Mikal Mokem Pasalu? And what difference is there in this question? Even if you got rid of the Shem Pesach and become Shlamim, it's still a common parcel because of machshava and pigul that you had in mind with the Shechita. The Quran says, the difference is like this. If you're going to tell me, when you slaughter machshavas psul, then you remove the name of Pesach. It becomes a shlamim. If that's the case, it's like other shlamim which are intending at the time of shechita to sprinkle the blood tomorrow, and therefore it's pigul. You have kares on eating it. But in Tema, if you're going to tell me if you're going to tell me machshavas psul will not remove the name of Pesach and make it shlamim, therefore it's a Pesach shlev izmanai, and therefore it's a carbon which is psula, which is possible. There's no chiyuv kares, there's no teras pigul on it, only on the carbon which, had it not been from machshava, it would be kosher. Because there's no machshavas pigul can be holding with a carbon which is possible. But anyway, that's a very good question. The Gemara doesn't have the answer. What was the question again? We said, well, it's possible anyway. So he says, no. If you can change it from mashtana and machshavas psul, it's like other shlamim, you have intention during shechita to sprinkle the blood tomorrow and it's pigul. If you're going to tell me it does not change, right? Then it comes out, it's a Pesach shlev izmanai, it's a pasul carbon, but there's no kares on the pigul. There's no teres pigul is only on a carbon where had it not been anything else, it would have been fine. If there's another problem, then pigul falls away. You know that, yeah? Pigul is only pigul where everything else is done fine. If there's another problem, then the pigul doesn't come either. Okay. After we've learned that if it's slaughter shlev izmanai, you need to slaughter it shlev lishmai. We said if you had two wrong intentions. So what's he saying? If you slaughter it in the wrong time, you need to slaughter it shlev lishmai to remove the Shem Pesach and make it into a shlamim. If you slaughter it for Pesach, it's a Pesach. Slaughtered shlev izmanai is possible. So Pesach, which is slaughtered lishmai, for the right intention, but shalai lishmai, and for the wrong intention, the shai yimos shana. The rest of the year. What's the din? Right? For Pesach, before it's time, you started slaughtering for Pesach, you finish the shechita for shlamim. What's the din? Did the shalai lishmai later on remove the lishmai you had first, and it changes, becomes a shlamim which is kosher? Or maybe the beginning of the shechita was for the sake of a Pesach, and it would pass it. Rabbi Bun Bachia, Shemshua Barabba Mekivan, since Sha'ama, He said at the end of the shechita, you're slaughtering it shalai lishmai for a shlamim. Nas keshachta b'shtiga shalai lishmai. So if you started shechting it stam, and you finish the shechita for a shlamim, who kosher, and that is kosher. Right? Before the come Pesach, the animals there, wherever, is a shake of Pesach. If you shecht it stam, it's like slaughtered it before Pesach. It comes puzzle. But the din is you started slaughtering stam. You finish the shechita shalai lishmai, let's say for shlamim, your thought helps to remove the Shem Pesach and to mashar it. It's the same thing. If you started your shechita clearly for the sake of Pesach, then your mashava will help shalai lishmai to change it into a shlamim. Now we've got a question. Amalei says, being Kani, if that's the case, that Pesach slaughtered early, lishmai v'shalai lishmai, we remove the Shem Pesach. You're going to tell me it's kosher. Well, according to that, according to Yochanan, you can have a machshava from one thought to one job to another. Are you going to tell me afilu shachtei lishmai? You slaughter it premature lishmai. The lizrek dama shalai lishmai. The intention of sprinkling the blood for, let's say, something else. The yaser, are you going to tell me the yaser b'shav v'shonik shachtei lishmai v'shalai lishmai? They're kasha. If that's the case, let's send everything back and say from the beginning you shechted it lishmai v'shalai lishmai. It should be fine. Amar says, man amar b'shtika kasha. Who told you, when you slaughter a Pesach before its time, you started slaughtering without any wrong thoughts, and you finish the shechita with the wrong thought of shlamim? Who said it's kosher? You want to learn that din, if you started to shecht it for Pesach, you finish with shlamim, it's kosher. How do you know? I know it could be, if you start shechting it b'shtika without any wrong thoughts, and you finish the shechita for a shlamim, maybe who din it is possible, perhaps it is possible after all. Okay, we'll carry on next time, Rabbi Isai.